This is the book Winchee, Mission Stories of Colin and Melva Winch by S Ross Goldstone. The true adventures of missionary pilots and nurses in the South Pacific, as retold to the children of Watertown SDA Church. I'm your storyteller, Austin Bacchus. Let's go! The first chapter is entitled The Day the Wharf Fell In. Prior to 1932, Moosehow Islanders had fiercely resisted any contacts with Western civilization. The situation was so dangerous that the Australian government prohibited any contact from outsiders. One Roman Catholic priest ignored the prohibition and was promptly killed, chopped in pieces, and buried by the natives. In April 1932, with government permission, Captain McLaren and a group of Solomon Islanders risked a similar fate and sailed to Moosehow Island, hoping to establish a mission station. Their ship, the Velomani, was met by angry Moosehows, armed with spears, bows, and arrows. As the canoes approached the ship, the Solomon Islanders on board began to sing, "Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go." And the warriors stopped paddling their canoes and listened to the beautiful harmony. They had never heard anything like it before, and allowed Captain McLaren to go ashore and speak to their chief. And within 12 months, 170 Moosehow Islanders had been converted. With government approval, a school was opened by Pastor Atkins at Beaulieu on October 23, 1933. Now, 23 years later, Colin and Melva Winch were notified they were to be transferred to Moosehow Island, where Colin was to be the superintendent of the 24-bed Beaulieu Hospital, principal of the Beaulieu Central School, teach grades 5, 6, and 7, and be district director of Moosehow, Emerau, and Tench Islands. Now, to Colin, this seemed a strange decision. He wasn't a trained teacher yet, but he was appointed as principal over the existing experienced headmaster and trained teacher, Nathan Roray. Frankly, Colin was embarrassed, but Nathan Roray, who was far more qualified for the position, was humble and gave Colin his loyal support. They became great friends. With Pastor Les Webster in charge, their boat, the Malalagi, was approaching Beaulieu, transporting Colin and Melva Winch, together with newly born Carrie, to take up their new appointment on Moosehow Island. It had been a rough crossing, but as they approached Beaulieu and moved into quieter waters, they began to appreciate the beauty of their surroundings. On entering Chattel Bay, Colin and Melva could see the mission station and school building. From the wharf protruding out into deep water in the bay, they noted that paths bordered by whitewashed stones had been formed leading to the school, the principal's home, and the mission office. The wharf at Beaulieu had been constructed from bush material and needed constant repairs in the hot, humid weather. As Colin and Melva looked up to the school building, they noted that Nathan Roray, the headmaster Colin was to replace, had all the students lined up, washed, and ready to welcome the new headmaster. As the Malalagi approached the wharf, the students marched from the school to the wharf with Nathan Roray calling the step. Left, right, left, right. They marched right up onto the wharf. 1, 2, 3, halt! With the command to halt, all of the students stamped their feet down in unison. It was too much for the wharf timbers. There was a splintering of wood as the planks gave way and the students fell through into the water below, amid squeals of surprise and then peals of laughter. Those on the Malalagi joined in the mirth, but Nathan Roray was embarrassed. Climbing back onto shore, the students sang a song of welcome in 4-part harmony. "We're glad to welcome you to Beaulieu School." Many of the students were married adults with children of their own. They were a stable influence on the younger children and made great workers in the gardens, growing food for the school and mission. Needless to say, the wharf was eventually repaired with new pylons and heavy decking timbers milled from the hard, durable quilla trees. While these repairs were being carried out, Colin decided to build a horizontal bar hanging off one side of the wharf. Bill Driscoll, one of his teachers in high school in Australia, had drilled the boys in acrobatics on a horizontal bar, and this skill Colin passed on to the boys, much to their enjoyment. Besides, the water below made for a soft, cool landing place. It added fun to the learning process. Okay, the next chapter is entitled Magic Water and Lost at Sea. Penicillin was the marvel of the age. Fortunately, the United States Army had, on departure at the end of World War II, donated large supplies to mission clinics and hospitals. Just one injection of the oily penicillin was often sufficient to deal with a medical problem. As a result, these medical clinics were well attended. Colin noticed that some patients presented claiming minor complaints such as a headache, expecting to be given an injection. On examination, there was no discernible illness, with the patient just hoping for an injection in case at some future time he might get sick. Fortunately, the U.S. Army had also donated large supplies of triple distilled water, a gift for which there was little medicinal use. Colin decided to treat these patients with an injection of distilled water. Such injections stung considerably, a factor that convinced the Nationals it was good medicine. Seems the more that it stung, the better the medicine, and every one of these patients went home happy. February 21, 1957 proved to be a special day for Colin and Melva. Carrie, their firstborn daughter, was born in Rabaul about the time the family took up their new appointment. In the tropical conditions in which they lived, infection could spread rapidly, sometimes with dire consequences. When Melva developed a severe and painful ear infection, Colin decided to give her an oily penicillin injection. However, Melva developed alarming symptoms, so Colin gave her a second injection, thinking that the infection was spreading. This only intensified her symptoms. Melva began to ache all over, particularly in her joints, until she could hardly walk. Both missionaries were alarmed. The mission ship Malalagi happened to be at Beaulieu, so they decided that Melva should seek help from a doctor at New Ireland. Following prayer for safekeeping, Melva and 4-month-old Carrie joined the crew on the overnight journey, leaving behind a deeply concerned husband and father whose only news was through scheduled radio contacts. The doctor in Cavien quickly diagnosed that Melva was allergic to penicillin and gave her an antidote, telling her she must never take penicillin again. When Colin received this news, he was greatly relieved and looked forward to his family's return. He missed both Melva and his new daughter greatly, and was sad that his action had intensified the crisis. 4 days later, the Malalagi was returning to Beaulieu under the control of Pastor Les Webster, having collected a load of second-hand corrugated iron and steel. Back in Beaulieu, Colin knew the heavy seas were running because he could hear waves pounding on the reef some distance away. Not the best sea traveler at any time, Melva became violently seasick. However, this was not the major problem. The major problem was that the load of steel on the deck was interfering with the compass. So the ship was sailing in a northeasterly direction when it should have been heading northwest. In fact, they were many degrees too far to the east. When morning came, the ship should have been at Beaulieu, but no land was to be seen. The crew realized they were well off course and lost in heavy seas. Poor Melva was so seasick she couldn't even care for her baby, so Pastor Hugh Dickens kindly looked after and fed Carrie. Not knowing their current position, the crew just guessed a compass heading that they hoped would bring them to Beaulieu. They traveled all that day and the next night, eventually came to an atoll known as Tench Island. Had they missed this atoll, they might not have seen land for many days. While at Tench Island, the two pastors went ashore for a few hours to meet with those living there, all of whom were Adventists. Melva chose to remain on the Malalagi, feeling too ill to leave her bunk. The boat at anchor in the ocean continued to roll from side to side, toss up and down, giving her no respite from her vomiting. In the meantime, Colin was almost beside himself with worry. Anger began to well up inside. What was wrong with the crew? Lord, please keep my dear ones and the crew safe, he prayed. When news finally came through that the boat was at Tench Island, Colin was confused. What were they doing at Tench Island when they should have been at Beaulieu several days ago? He continued with his teaching, but rushed home to listen in to the morning and evening radio contacts, hoping to hear more news. On returning to their ship, the crew set sail on a new course which they believed would take them to Musau. Again, the iron load played havoc with the compass. For 2 more days, the Malalagi plowed through rough seas before land was sighted. However, the land they had sighted was not Musau, it was New Ireland, the port from which they had departed 5 days previously. Colin suggested to the crew by radio contact that they swing the ship's compass and note the deviation caused by the steel before leaving the harbor. That evening, the Malalagi once more set sail for Beaulieu, arriving without major incident the next morning. Weakened and dehydrated by prolonged seasickness, Melva, with baby Carrie, disembarked from the boat and fell into the arms of her relieved husband. There were tears of rejoicing and prayers of thankfulness as the Winch family was reunited. This frightening experience left Melva with a dread of ships. It had been a horrible experience for a relatively new missionary and mother. Be sure to tune in next time for more stories from the book Winchee by S Ross Goldstone, which is available at the Adventist Book Center. And meanwhile, check out these videos and others on my channel, with many more mission stories and Bible skits for kids and adults. God bless you.